The arena of broken bones there was thick with smoke and screams. The arena of Zarnak, also called the arena of broken bones, was a brutal circle of stone, fire, and blood. Thousands of aliens filled the seats, watching with hungry eyes. They came to enjoy the pain, to laugh at the weak, and today, to mock the human. His name was Daniel Cross, a soldier from Earth. His ship had crashed during a mission near the edge of alien space. He had survived barely. Now, he stood in the center of the arena, chained at the wrists, his clothes torn, his body covered in cuts. One leg was bleeding, and his right arm hung useless at his side. "He can't even stand properly, an alien," shouted. Another one laughed, spitting from the upper tier. "This human is already dead." But Daniel didn't speak. He didn't cry. He didn't ask for mercy. He just stared at the gate across the arena, waiting for his opponent. Suddenly, the ground shook. The metal gate began to rise with a loud screech. Behind it came a creature, with thick gray skin, for arms, and black eyes filled with rage. The announcer's voice echoed in the arena. "Prepare for the warlord champion, Krager the Bonebreaker." The crowd roared with joy. Krager had killed 30 fighters. No one had ever hurt him. No one had survived more than 2 minutes. Daniel's breathing slowed. His fingers curled into fists. His heart didn't beat faster, it beat deeper. He knew fear. He had seen war. But he had something else in him too, a fire that refused to die. As the monster stepped forward, something unexpected happened. A second, smaller cage was wheeled in beside the battle area. Inside it sat a girl-and alien girl with glowing violet eyes and silver cuffs on her wrists. Her skin was smooth and pale blue, and her hair hung in soft white strands. She looked noble, proud, angry. The announcer grinned, his voice dripping with amusement. "Today's prize is not just survival, but a slave win, and she's yours. Human, lose, and you both die." The crowd went wild. They loved this. To them, it was entertainment. A wounded man, a monster, and a prize that could scream. Daniel looked at the girl. Their eyes met. She didn't flinch. She didn't ask for help. She looked at him as if to say, "Don't bother. You'll die anyway." And then Krager charged. The beast's footsteps shook the ground. It raised two of its arms high, aiming to crush Daniel in one strike. The crowd screamed for blood. Daniel dodged at the last second, rolling under the blow. Pain tore through his leg, but he kept moving. He had no weapons, only speed and anger. Krager roared and turned. He swung again. This time, Daniel was too slow. The monster's fist caught his shoulder. Bone cracked. Daniel fell hard. "Get up!" Someone in the crowd shouted, laughing. "Die already," yelled another. But Daniel didn't stay down. His hand reached for the hot sand. He pushed himself up, arms shaking. In the cage, the alien girl's eyes widened. He was still alive. Daniel took a deep breath. Then he ran not away but toward Krager. The crowd gasped. Krager looked confused. He wasn't used to prey running into his fists. He swung again, all for arms at once, but Daniel jumped using the wall as support. He kicked off, spinning in midair. His foot slammed into Krager's jaw with everything he had left. The monster staggered back. 1 second of silence. Then the crowd roared again, but not with laughter this time. This time, there was shock. Daniel landed hard, his ankle twisting. He screamed but didn't stop. He rolled to the side just as Krager lunged forward in fury. Dust flew, blood spilled. But in the middle of it, Daniel grabbed a broken piece of the arena floor sharp like a blade. As Krager lifted him in one hand, Daniel stabbed upward right through the monster's eye. Krager screamed, dropped him, and then fell like a mountain. Collapsing. Silence. Then madness. The alien screamed louder than ever. Some cheered, some cursed, but no one could believe it. The human had won. He stood, barely breathing, his face covered in blood, not all of it his own. He looked toward the cage. The alien girl stared back, her lips slightly open, not with anger, not with pride, but something new. Respect. Daniel dropped the stone blade. He didn't raise his fist in victory. He didn't smile. He just said one word under his breath. One fight down, and then he passed out cold. The slave, who refused to bowl the arena, was still echoing with the sound of silence. Daniel Cross lay motionless on the sand, blood trailing from his mouth, dust clinging to his sweat-covered skin. The medics didn't run to him. Not yet. Not until the crowd had seen the body. Not until the announcer confirmed whether the wounded human was alive or just a lucky corpse. High above in a dark balcony sat the alien nobles. They watched through glowing lenses and sipped from glasses that held liquid fire. The bets had been placed, and most of them had lost. They weren't angry. They were amused, entertained. Humans, one noble scoffed, are like cockroaches, hard to kill, but never worth keeping. But someone else had been watching someone in a cage. Her name was Kailari. She had once stood on her own balcony, a princess among the ruling class of the now fallen Virelian Empire. Her voice once commanded fleets. Her name once meant fear. But those days were gone. Now she wore shackles. Now she was a prize. She had been sitting still throughout the fight, arms folded, face proud, not blinking, not caring. She had seen fighters before stronger than this human fall like dolls in the dust. She had expected the same today. But when the beast dropped to its knees howling, clutching the sharp rock in its face, and when the broken human stood tall, even for a second, something in her expression shifted. Not pity, not admiration, confusion. When the guards wheeled her cage away after the battle, they laughed as they kicked Daniel's still body. "Your new master's dead," one of them mocked. Kailari said nothing. She looked at the human lying in blood, and for the first time, she wondered, why had he kept fighting? Not for glory, not for riches, then for what? Daniel woke in chains. Again. His arm was wrapped in some kind of alien bandage, thick with green gel. His ankle had been repaired, but it still ached like fire. He blinked. The light in the cell was dim, flickering. The floor beneath him was metal, cold and stained with rust and dried blood. A shadow moved in the corner. Kailari. She wasn't in chains this time, but her cuffs still blinked with red light. The guards had left her there, waiting in the same room, like a trophy put beside its new owner. "Back from the dead," she said flatly. Daniel winced, pushing himself up on one elbow, more or less. She didn't smile, didn't offer help, just stared. "You're not like the others," she said finally. Daniel raised an eyebrow. "Others? The other humans, the ones who screamed, the ones who begged. You didn't, not even once." He stayed quiet. His throat was dry. Kailari stepped closer. The light hit her face, now beautiful, yes, but also scarred, a thin mark across her left cheek, a reminder of chains older than her time here. She sat, across from him, legs crossed, her gaze locked onto his. "You fight like someone who wants to die," she said. Daniel let out a small laugh. "I've already died once. Everything after that is just extra time." That puzzled her. "Why did you take the fight? You could have let the beast kill you. No one would have blamed you." He didn't answer right away. Then, "Because you were in the cage." Her eyes narrowed. "I've seen cages before," Daniel continued. "I've been in them, and I've seen what it does to people. What it did to me. I thought maybe, if I survived, I could change at least one thing." Kailari's voice grew cold. "You don't know me. You don't know what I've done. I don't need to." That made her stand. She turned away, biting back something, anger, shame, maybe fear. "You're a fool," she snapped. "These people don't want you to win. They want you to suffer. They'll keep putting bigger monsters in front of you until your body breaks and your head rolls in the dirt. Then I'll keep getting up." Daniel said. "Why?" He didn't look at her this time, just said softly, "Because if I stop, they win." That night, Kailari couldn't sleep. She had grown used to pain, to silence. But this man, this broken human with a cracked arm and stubborn eyes, was something else. Something dangerous. Not because he was strong, but because he still had hope. The next day, word spread across the camps and cages, the human lives, the slave speaks to him. Whispers turned to stories. Some laughed. Some didn't. In the control tower above the arena, the noble lords began to whisper too. "Maybe we should kill him early," one said. "No." Another replied, "Let's raise the stakes instead." Kailari, listening through a stolen comm chip, heard those words clearly, and for the first time since her capture, she felt something deep inside her. Wake up. The wager of humiliation. Wind was cold that morning, unusually so for the blazing blood-stained planet of Zarnok. The arena was still sleeping, its fires dimmed and its gates closed. But inside the High Council chamber, the nobles of Zarnok were wide awake, tall, twisted aliens in rich crimson robes, each with sharp eyes and cruel smiles, gathered around a long obsidian table. At the center of that table hovered a hologram, the wounded human's last fight, looping over and over. Again a Daniel cross, standing tall, covered in dust and blood, stabbing the arena's champion through the eye with nothing but a broken rock. They rewound it. They zoomed in. They sneered. He's not strong. His Lord Vernick, an elder noble with half his face replaced by metal. He's lucky. He's not lucky, said Lady Syrixa, her tongue forked like a snake. He's stubborn, dangerous. If he wins one more fight, the lower houses will see him as a symbol. A symbol, Vernick scoffed. He's a toy, a sick joke with a heartbeat. That's when another noble, the youngest, spoke. Then let's turn the joke into a show. They all looked at him. Let's give him a fight so humiliating, so painful, that even his hope dies. Vernick grinned, showing yellow teeth. Yes, and let's raise the prize. Let's raise it so high that he dares to believe he has a chance. Later that day, the arena gates opened again. This time, there was no crowd yet. Only workers, guards, slaves, preparing the blood-soaked sand, setting up traps under the floor. Whispering about the next match, Daniel sat alone in the corner of his cell, resting his eyes. His arm was still sore, but the bleeding had stopped. His ankle could hold his weight again. That was all he needed. Kaylari stood by the cell door, arms crossed. She hadn't said much in 2 days, but she hadn't left either. You're not curious? Daniel finally asked. About who I was before this. Kaylari didn't move. No. He chuckled softly. Good. I was boring. Finally, she turned. And yet, somehow, you ended up here. He looked up. Yeah. Funny how the universe works. There was silence. Then, she walked forward and sat beside him. They're planning something, she said quietly. Something cruel. I heard them talking. Daniel sighed. Let me guess. Bigger monster. Kaylari shook her head. Worse. A warrior, not a beast. A trained killer who used to lead assassins. They want you humiliated, not just hurt. Daniel leaned his head back against the wall. Well, that sounds fun. Kaylari stared at him. You could still refuse. They won't stop the games. But maybe they'll kill you quickly. No pain, no spectacle. Daniel looked at her, dead serious. That's what they want. For me to bow, for me to quit. That's why I can't. Kaylari hesitated, then said something she never expected to say. Then don't die. The next day, the arena was full. Aliens of every kind had come to watch. The stands overflowed with laughter, drinks, and cruel bets. The announcer stood tall in the center, his voice booming. Today's match is special. The human has proven difficult to kill, so we've decided to offer him something priceless. Gasps echoed. The announcer pointed toward a balcony. If the human wins today, he earns not only survival, but a chance to sit at the trials, table where only generals dine. The crowd burst into disbelief. A human sitting with nobles? Unheard of. And if he loses, the announcer sneered, we take back his prize, the slave girl. And he watches as we burn her collar into his skin. Daniel stood in the sand, listening. His jaw tightened. His fist closed. Kaylari, from a holding cell above, didn't blink. She refused to scream, but her hands trembled behind her back, across. The arena, the gate rose. A tall, lean alien stepped out, armor black as night, twin swords across his back, and a mask that hid his face. The announcer whispered one final word. Meet Syrinx, the Death Wind. Syrinx was unlike any fighter Daniel had faced. He didn't roar. He didn't charge. He simply walked, silent and slow, eyes locked on Daniel. Through the mask, Daniel moved first. He ran, not away, but in a wide circle, buying time, forcing Syrinx to react. The assassin didn't move until Daniel came close, then struck like lightning. Steel flashed. Daniel barely dodged. A line of blood appeared on his ribs. Then another. The crowd cheered. Daniel backed away, breathing hard. He had no weapons, nothing but sand and air. And pain. Syrinx came again. This time, Daniel grabbed a handful of dust and threw it into the assassin's eyes. It worked for half a second, but Syrinx didn't need sight. He spun and sliced Daniel's shoulder open. Daniel fell. The crowd screamed. Kaylari stood, her knuckles white on the bars. Daniel tried to get up, but his legs shook. Syrinx walked closer, slow and sure. He lifted his sword, and that's when Daniel did something that made the whole arena freeze. He laughed. Blood on his lips, shaking, nearly broken and still laughing. You think this is enough? He gasped. I've survived worse. I've survived Earth. Then he rolled forward, grabbed the assassin's own ankle and twisted. Sarx fell. The crowd shouted. Daniel didn't wait. He ducked forward, yanked one of the swords free from Sarx's back and drove it into the sand. Not to kill, but to trap. The sword hit a buried spark trap meant to shock the loser. But this time, the blast exploded under Sarx's body. The assassin screamed. Daniel crawled backward, eyes barely open. He fell to his knees. The arena was quiet. Then someone stood. The nobles one by one staring. Even Kalari couldn't believe it. The wounded human had won again. But this time, he didn't just survive. He embarrassed them. Secrets in the chained cell was silent, not because the guards weren't watching, or because the electric lights weren't buzzing, but because Daniel Cross wasn't moving. He was lying on the floor, motionless, face down in a pool of dried blood and victory. The match against Sarx had ended barely 4 hours ago. The explosion had thrown both men to the ground, but only one had gotten up. Daniel didn't remember the cheering. He didn't remember the medics. All he remembered was Kalari's face wide-eyed, still behind the bars before everything turned black. Now he was back in the recovery cell. Bones cracked again, and this time even his soul felt heavy. The door hissed open. He didn't raise his head. He didn't have the strength, but the steps were familiar. Kalari knelt beside him, slowly. Without speaking, she held a small bowl of water, cool and clean, stolen from the noble's quarters. She lifted his head gently and brought it to his lips. He sipped, coughed, then looked at her. "You didn't have to come," he said hoarsely. "I didn't," she replied. "I chose to." A long silence followed. Then Kalari stood and walked to the wall. She leaned against it, arms crossed, watching him carefully. "You should be dead," she said. "You know that." Daniel chuckled weakly. "It's a talent. I watched you fight. You had no plan, no weapons, no chance." He nodded slowly. "But I had anger." Kalari tilted her head. "That's not enough to win." Daniel's eyes flicked toward her. Was it enough to survive? She didn't answer that. Instead, her voice dropped lower. "You said something before you passed out. You said you survived Earth." Daniel didn't blink, didn't move. "I did," he said softly. "But Earth didn't survive me." Kalari stared at him for a long time. There was pain behind that sentence, pain too sharp to ask about directly. So she didn't. Instead, she sat on the cold floor beside him, and after a long pause, she said something she hadn't told anyone in years. "I was born in the Varelian Empire. My father ruled the sixth moon. I was next in line, but we lost the war." Daniel's eyes opened more fully now. "The war your kind started." Kalari looked away. "No, the war his kind started." She pointed upward. "The nobles, the trade, lords, they sold our cities for weapons. They betrayed their own people, and the rest of us, we became slaves." Daniel nodded slowly. "That's how I became a soldier. Our leaders made deals with devils too. I didn't want war, but they signed it in my name." Kalari glanced at him, puzzled. "Then why keep fighting?" Daniel didn't answer right away. He sat up with effort, his ribs grinding. "I fight," he said, "because I couldn't stop the war. But maybe I could stop something else from breaking, even if it's just one person, even if it's just you." Kalari felt something tighten in her chest, a feeling she didn't like, a feeling she didn't trust. Hope outside. The guards whispered. Why hasn't she tried to escape? She's just waiting for him to die. No, she speaks to him. I heard her. I think she's loyal now. To a human. Don't be stupid. But inside the cell, something was changing. Kalari sat beside Daniel every night now. She cleaned his wounds, not because she had to, but because she wanted to. She listened to him dream. Sometimes he cried out names in his sleep, names of people who weren't here, people who might be gone. And slowly, Daniel began to heal. Not just his bones, but his fire, the kind of fire that doesn't burn, it glows. He started training again, just a little, at first, only with movement, lifting his arms, standing, then slow punches, fast breaths. Kalari watched. One morning, she dropped something in front of him, a rusted pipe, about the length of a sword. Daniel picked it up. What's this? A test. He grinned. You offering to fight me now? Kalari smirked. I'd win. They stood in the narrow space of the cell and sparred. At first, slowly, then faster. She was fast, elegant. He was clumsy, blunt but unpredictable. He moved like someone who had fought for real. Who knew what it meant to lose Dot at the end? They were both panting. Daniel laughed and dropped the pipe. Okay, you win. Kaylari didn't laugh. She just stared at him. You should know, she said. They're planning something again. I heard it from the guards. Daniel raised an eyebrow. Bigger monster. She shook her head. They're going to make you fight a human. Daniel froze. His smile disappeared. A human? He repeated. Kaylari nodded. Captured from another world. Strong. Young. They want you to fight your own kind. Kill your own kind. Daniel looked away. His jaw tightened. His hands clenched. He stood up slowly and walked to the bars. Outside, the guards were watching him, pretending not to listen. Kaylari came beside him. You can refuse, she said. No, he whispered. I can't. Why not? He looked at her not like a slave, not like a prize, but like someone who mattered. Because if I don't fight, they'll kill him. And if I do fight, Kaylari placed a hand on his wrist. You can choose not to kill. Daniel looked at her hand, then back at the arena beyond. I used to believe that mercy was weakness, he said. But maybe it's the last strength I have left. Kaylari smiled, not fully, just a flicker. The first real one she'd shown, then use it. That night, in the Noble Towers, a message was sent across the stars. Prepare the next fight. The human will face his own kind, and this time he will break. But down in the shadows of the arena, the figures sat side by side in silence, a fallen soldier and a forgotten slave. And in the space between them, a dangerous seed had started. To grow. Not revenge. Not fear, but something far more dangerous. Rebellion. The assassin's gamut twin moons of Zarnog hung low in the sky, casting pale silver light through the narrow slits of the prison cell. Daniel sat cross-legged on the cold metal floor, silent, focused, and staring at the makeshift wooden dummy Kaylari had helped him build from scraps. He didn't swing at it. He didn't strike wildly. He studied it, because Daniel had once learned something from an old war mentor on Earth. Before you fight a man, understand his soul. If he's already broken, the battle is over before it begins. But this wasn't a man he was about to fight. It was a human, captured, conditioned, pushed into the same bloody games, and Daniel knew something wasn't right. Earlier that day, the guards had arrived without warning. They dragged Kaylari out of the cell first. No explanation, no words, just electric batons and a silent order. Daniel tried to rise, but a stun blast to the chest pinned him down. He coughed blood as the doors hissed shut. He didn't see Kaylari again for the rest of the night. Inside the noble's observation chamber, Kaylari stood under a harsh spotlight, her arms chained, her eyes narrow. Before her stood Lord Vernick, flanked by nobles with hollow eyes and cruel minds. She speaks to him. One of them hissed. She trains him, said another. She's not a prize anymore. She's his partner. Vernick stepped forward, staring into her face. We offered you glory, protection, but you side with a broken monkey. Kaylari didn't respond. So Vernick leaned in and whispered coldly, we should cut out your tongue. Still, she said nothing. She is too proud to beg, hissed another. Then let her watch. Vernick decided. Let her see what becomes of her precious human when we break him from the inside. The next day, Daniel was taken to the arena. Early. No crowds yet. No fanfare. Just him and a quiet shadow standing across the field. Daniel blinked. It was a man, a human man, younger than him, maybe 25, tall, strong, dressed in loose black armor, his face unreadable. Daniel's heart twisted. He hadn't seen another human face in months, and now this one looked back at him not with hope, but emptiness. The announcer's voice crackled above, dry and bitter. Today, for the first time in Zarnok's history, man shall fight man. No beasts, no monsters, only blood and truth. Daniel, step forward. You don't have to do this, he called out. The other man said nothing. Daniel tried again. They're using you. You know that, right? This isn't a fight, it's a show. The man didn't flinch. Then he moved fast to fast. Daniel ducked just in time. A blade swiped past his cheek, close enough to burn. He rolled backward, kicking up sand. Wait, he shouted. I'm not here to hurt you. But the man kept coming. He struck with the precision of a trained assassin. Every move was sharp, silent, controlled. Daniel realized it almost too late. This wasn't just a fighter. This was a weapon dot from the viewing platform. Kailari watched, her wrists still bound in chains. She strained forward against the guards. "Stop him," she yelled. "He doesn't want to fight." The guards laughed. That's the point. But Kailari saw something the nobles didn't. She saw the look in the assassin's eyes. There was no hate, no anger, only fear. Daniel knew something was wrong. He was fast, but the man was faster. Still, he didn't go for the kill. He struck the shoulder, then the leg, always the non-lethal zones. He was holding back, just like Daniel. They were both playing a deadly dance, with invisible chains around their necks. Daniel jumped back, sand flying. "Who are you?" he gasped. Finally, the man spoke. "Number 37. Daniel blinked. "That's not a name." The man said nothing. Then Daniel saw it just for a flash under the armor, a control collar, standard military tech from Earth, modified. Daniel cursed under his breath. "They're controlling you." The man froze, and in that second of hesitation, a sharp buzzing sound echoed through the arena. The collar flashed red, and the man screamed, clutching his head. He staggered, fell to his knees. Daniel didn't wait. He ran toward him, not to strike, but to help. The guards above screamed, "No, kill him, kill him." Daniel reached the man and grabbed the collar. "I'm going to end this," he said, and then he pulled the emergency fuse from the back of the control unit. The collar sparked, fell, silence. The nobles were speechless. Vernick stood, rage boiling on his face. "What is this?" Kailari, still bound, laughed softly. "That is mercy." Back in the arena, the assassin collapsed, breathing hard. His eyes cleared. He looked up at Daniel. "Thank you." Daniel nodded. "Do you have a name?" The man swallowed. "Micah. Sergeant Micah Wren, Earth Colonial Division." Daniel helped him to his feet. "You're free now," he said. Micah shook his head. "Not yet, but I'll fight beside you, if you'll have me." Daniel turned toward the silent crowd above. The nobles, the monsters in robes, and he raised one hand, not in anger, not in victory, but in warning. That night, the fire of rebellion spread through the slave camps. Daniel Cross had spared a killer, had refused to break, and Kailari, she knew now, without doubt, that this man wasn't just a survivor. He was a storm coming straight for the throne. They didn't chain her anymore, not because she was trusted, but because Kailari Fan, once a royal of the Varillian Moons, had learned how to make chains vanish with silence, with patience, with plans. The nobles of Zarnok thought she was still his prize. They thought she was Daniel Cross's shadow, his silent trophy. But they didn't understand what she had truly become. She was the spark, and now the flame was ready to spread. The rebellion did not begin with swords. It began with whispers. Kailari moved through the back corridors of the arena after midnight, her footsteps light, her cloak stolen from a careless noble servant. With every step, she passed others, janitors, cooks, silent laborers, slaves. Each of them gave a nod. No words, just the nod. That was enough. In one of the lower maintenance tunnels, she met Micah, the human assassin Daniel had freed. His eyes were clearer now, his voice stronger, but guilt still weighed on his shoulders. "Are you sure this will work?" he asked. Kailari didn't hesitate. "We only get one shot. If the gates don't open in time, if the guards call the outer reinforcements, they'll slaughter us all." Micah finished. She looked at him. "No," she said. "They'll try." High above the sand, Daniel Cross slept with one eye open. He was no longer in the dirty prison cell. He had been promoted to a gladiator's private chamber, a room with a real bed, clean water, and guards posted outside. 24/7s, a trick, a bribe, a cage with golden bars. He had earned honor in the eyes of the nobles. But Daniel didn't want honor. He wanted freedom. For himself, for Micah, for Kailari, for everyone still in chains. When Kailari slipped into his room through a maintenance hatch, he didn't flinch. He just smiled. "You're late." She rolled her eyes. "You're always bleeding when I find you." "This time I brought armor." She tossed a small pack toward him. Inside it was a shock shield, a reinforced vest, and a handheld energy dagger. "Where did you get this?" Daniel asked. Kailari gave him a small grin. "Nobles lock everything, but they never think slaves are smart enough to open doors." Daniel stood, wincing slightly. "Then let's blow a few open, an hour before dawn." It began. The entire arena staff was preparing for the largest match in Zarnak history, a 10-fighter brawl between captured warriors. The crowd would be massive. The nobles would be present, and the slaves would be everywhere serving food, cleaning stands, polishing weapons. No one noticed as one by one they paused to tie their rags tighter, to clench small hidden blades in trembling hands, to murmur ancient prayers in the dark. Kailari stood in the shadow of the main tower, a small communicator in her hand. Her voice was calm. "On my mark," she said. The nobles gathered in their private chamber. High above the arena, Lord Vernick wore his ceremonial gold robe. Lady Serixa dragged her long claws along the marble railing, watching the audience scream in excitement. And in the center of it all, the announcer's voice boomed once more. "Welcome, citizens of Zarnak. Today we witness not survival, but glory. Let the blood feast begin." Down in the holding area, 10 fighters stood waiting. Daniel Cross was among them. Micah stood beside him. One alien leaned over and whispered, "You humans always cause trouble." Daniel smirked. "You haven't seen anything yet." The gates began to rise. The crowd leaned forward. And then dash boom. Not in the arena. Behind it. Deep in the heart of the tower. Smoke poured from the eastern corridor. The slave quarters exploded. Into chaos, not panic, but purpose. Dozens of former slaves armed with kitchen knives, scavenged gear, stun batons rushed the guards. The nobles jumped to their feet. "What is this?" And in that moment, Kailari stepped into view. On the same platform where prizes were usually displayed, she was no longer wearing chains. She wore a cloak of midnight. Her cuffs were broken. Her eyes burned like stars, and in her hand she held a stolen plasma rifle. "This is no longer your world," she said softly. And then into a hidden mic. Now, Daniel heard the voice. He ran, but not toward the other fighters. Up the stairs, through fire, through falling debris, toward Kailari. The guards came at him from the left. Micah tackled one, driving his blade into its ribs. Daniel grabbed a rifle from the second, turned, fired. A clean shot. They pushed forward, step by step. At the top of the stairwell, Daniel burst through the gate and skidded to a stop. Kailari was there facing 5 nobles, all armed. "Drop it." One growled. Now, she didn't move. Daniel raised his voice. "Kailari, wait till late." The noble fired, but she was faster. She dropped to her knee and fired 3 quick shots to hit the wall. One hit the noble square in the chest. The recoil knocked her back, but she didn't stop. Daniel reached her side as the more nobles fled. "You could have died," he gasped. She looked up at him and smiled. "I died the day they put a collar on me," she whispered. "Today, I live." The crowd didn't understand what they were seeing. The match had stopped. Explosions rang from the arena walls. Slaves were taking over towers. Fighters were throwing down weapons and joining the revolt. Even the announcer's booth had gone silent, and in that silence, Kailari's voice echoed across the arena. Broadcast from the nobles' control panel: "To all who serve in silence, stand up. The time of chains is over." The crowd was stunned. And then they stood, some in fear, but many in respect, and one by one, they began to kneel not for the nobles, but for the broken human and the slave who fought back. The sky above Zarnak burned gold. The rebellion had lasted just 8 hours, but it felt like 100 years. The arena, once a place of blood and cheers, now stood silent. Its walls cracked, its torches snuffed, its noble banners torn and tossed to the wind like old lies. In the center of that broken place stood Daniel Cross, still bleeding from a wound on his side, holding a dull rifle in one hand. His other hand rested on his knee as he struggled to breathe. But he wasn't alone. Beside him stood Kailari, calm and tall, a soft wind blowing strands of her silver-white hair across her face. Her armor was scorched, her knuckles bruised, but her eyes shone clearer than they had in years. And behind them, a crowd stretched from the gates to the stairs, former slaves, arena fighters, even a few alien guards who had quietly laid down there. Weapons. No one was shouting. No one was cheering. They were simply waiting. Inside the Tower of Command, Lord Vernick knelt on shattered glass, his breathing ragged. Blood trickled from a cut across his brow. His robes, once lined with gold, were torn and stained with ash. Micah stood behind him, weapon raised. Kailari walked forward, her boots crunching glass, and looked down at the noble who once held her leash. "Do you remember me?" she asked. Vernick spat. "You were always beneath me." She nodded. Then stepped aside. Daniel entered next. His body ached with every movement, his vision blurred, but his voice was steady. He looked at the noble not with hate, with pity. You could have built something with all this power, Daniel said softly, but you only built cages. Vernak's lip curled. And what will you do? Rule this world with your pet alien girl? Micah stepped forward, anger rising, but Daniel held up a hand. No, Daniel said, we're not rulers, we're survivors. He turned to Kailari. You decide what happens to him. She looked at Vernak for a long time. Her hand hovered near her weapon. Then she spoke. Put him in the arena. Let the people judge. Micah smiled coldly. Let's see how he does without chains on us. 3 days later, the arena gates opened once more, but there was no blood sport. No announcer. No cages. Instead, people entered slowly, former slaves, workers, and warriors. They sat not as watchers, but as witnesses. Kailari stood in the center, her voice clear. This world is not mine to rule. It belongs to all who bled to free it. She turned to Daniel, who limped up the stairs behind her, wearing simple armor. No crown. The crowd stood and began to chant not his name, but one word: free, free, free. Daniel looked at Kailari and leaned in. I think they just made their first law. She smiled. You gave them the fire. No, he said. You lit it, that night, as stars blinked above Zarnok for the first time. Without the glow of arena fire, Daniel and Kailari stood on a high balcony overlooking the city. Below them, families gathered near rebuilt tents. Children ran free, laughing. There were no callers, no guards. Only music, simple, honest. Kailari sighed. When I was young, I believed I'd rule a moon. Daniel glanced at her. Do you still want to? She shook her head. Now, I only want to rebuild it, with my own hands. He nodded. What about the nobles that ran? They'll try to come back. Daniel smiled. Let them try. Kailari turned to him, her voice softer now. And you, what do you want? Daniel crossed. He thought for a long moment. I want to stop waking up expecting a fight. Kailari nodded slowly. Then, stay, she whispered. His eyes met hers. I think I will. Weeks passed. Then months. The galaxy beyond Zarnok learned of the rebellion slowly, through whispers, from smuggler lips and black market signals. And always, the story was the same. The human didn't take the crown. He gave it away. The slave who once bowed now speaks for a world. They laughed at the wounded man until he stood, and they fell. And in a quiet part of the rebuilt city, in a garden with no walls, 2 chairs sat side by side. One held a man with tired eyes and calm hands. The other held a woman who no longer wore chains. They sat in silence most days, and in that silence, there was peace.